I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. When I was sober for about 3 or 4 months, my wife rolled over in bed one night and said, "So how long do you have to keep going to these meetings?" And I knew that was going to be a lot of trouble. Steve, how you doing?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. I was just wondering where John might be, like maybe out in the woods, like trying to kill something and cook it for dinner, or what? What do you think?
Or getting killed by one of those things.
Yeah,
I was thinking about him because when this drops, he will have 23 years sober.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Valentine's Day. Congratulations, John.
23 years. No, I was going to have 33 years.
Is it? Oh, is it? Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
My math was off.
Yeah, 33 years next Wednesday.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
So anyway, next Wednesday or next Tuesday is that?
Tuesday.
Tuesday,
14th.
next Tuesday. Yep, next Tuesday. I'm looking at it now. Anyway, I'm glad to be here, Matt. Things are good.
Yeah, things are good. My way, I could do another topic on halt if I needed to because my wife was away last week, so I am tired. And when I get tired, I'm all over the place, but I'm doing the right things because I'm doing this. I consider this a meeting.
Yeah.
And I go to my Monday meeting, and I probably should go to more meetings, but I'm doing what I can. But the topic tonight is, why do we still carry the message? Why do we still go to meetings? Why do we still listen to podcasts? Why do we still do the things that you have to do in recovery? Because if you got sober, don't you just have to stop? Aren't you cured? The answer is no.
No.
And we need to talk about why that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important for some of us, and I know you and I feel the same way on this. It's important for me to stay connected because I find that when I don't stay connected, when I'm not in touch with those things that helped get me sober, that I start to drift, and that drift it's unnoticeable. You know, I tell this story, and years ago and this is when I came back, I had a speaking engagement, and I went out to a small suburb outside of Hartford, Connecticut, and it wasn't a big, maybe 15 people. But anyway, I told my story, and my story happened to be a typical story where I stopped going to meetings and I relapsed. And an older gentleman came up to me, and he said something that I've shared, and many people have bought into it. He came up to me and said, I noticed that I realized that when I stopped going to meetings, my thinking changed and I didn't notice. And that's the problem. It changes so slightly that I don't notice the change. And again, I have the hindsight of understanding what happens when I don't go to meetings, right? And that for me was a relapse and another almost catastrophe of my life, almost another divorce, all of those things. And luckily they were almost for me. They didn't happen, but that's where I was headed if I didn't get back into the program. So for me, it's easy for me to say, oh, I know why I need to go to meetings, but it might be harder for somebody who maybe came in and they put together a good bunch of sobriety and now they're wondering, do I still need to go to meetings, and why do we go to meetings?
I'd love to know a little bit your thoughts on, if you drift away from meetings, why do you drift off on your sobriety? What do you think causes that?
Well, I think it's like anything else. If you don't use it, you lose it. And that's any skill or habit or anything, right? So if you and this is from my experience. If you're a gym rat and you love going to the gym and working out, or you're a runner and you like to run, that when you start to slack off of that, if you're used to running 5 times a week and you start running 3 or 4 and then 2, like all of a sudden it gets harder to get back into it. And I think that's with a lot of things. I also think that for me and for many alcoholics, the danger is so high right? I mean, it's not just, you're going to get out of shape, or maybe maybe there's something else going on, or maybe, if you're in school, maybe you don't do as well grade wise if you start slacking off on but for me, it's a really, really, there's a lot, we talk a lot about the yets out there, I've never spent a day in jail. I've never spent a day in prison yet. I've never had an accident where I've severely injured or killed somebody yet. All of those things are possible for me if I start drinking again. They can all come in. And those, to me, I go to meetings, I hear those stories, right? Friday night, a guy came in. We had a new guy came in a new guy, you would know him, just came in. I think you would know him. I think he was one of the Thursday night guys for a while, but came in. I think from my understanding, he just got out of jail, right? He was in the program, lost his way, started drinking. My understanding, there was a domestic violence type of thing, and he ended up in jail. And that's what waits for us, That's what awaits for us if we don't keep our head into this program.
The habit thing is big for me. Going to Joe and Charlie at John's house on Wednesdays has been a bit of a lift because I got to drive a half hour, and I'm there for a couple hours, and then I'm driving home, and there's other things that I have packed into my routine, and doing that one extra is different. It would be great if I could find a good Wednesday night meeting after that's over, because I'll stick with it because I'll be in the habit. But it becomes difficult. I can do what I'm doing as long as I'm doing it. Right. Once something drops, it's really hard to get back in that routine.
I agree 100%. When I do a certain amount of meetings, it's like once I'm into it, if I add another meeting to my schedule, not only I get used to it, but my wife gets used to it, and then we're able to plan around that. And then all of a sudden, if you stop that, then that night becomes available, and it gets a little bit hard. For me, it gets harder to go back and get back into that routine. And I agree with the Joe and Charlie on Wednesday night. It's a nice little uplift for me. It's more of an intense little thing, right? I mean, it's 6 or 7 of us there, depending on how many guys are showing up, and and it's basically pretty much a 2-hour meeting. So it really is a little bit different, and I actually think it's a great way to spend 15, 16 weeks of doing something like that.
If you haven't done it, Joe and Charlie, get yourself into it. I've got some ideas on something we might be able to do as a podcast around it, although I don't want to add another project right now because I got a project working that is killing me. It is something worth doing when you're around a small group of men or a small group of women, and you're together one day a week for a couple hours every single week. It does tighten you up, and you're all moving in the same direction. And you have to share at these things because there's only like 6 people there, but they are great instances. And this kind of goes into my thought around why I keep going and why you could slip. And I think that is that contact with another alcoholic. I was thinking about this last night. You can quibble with the higher power stuff, and there's some other things that like, well, if I don't really do an amends here or there, I don't think there's any quibbling that you get a lot of benefit from interacting with another alcoholic. And if I'm not going to meetings, I'm probably not making phone calls to other people in the program.
Right.
I think that's the issue. Like, if I'm not going to go to meetings, what I should do is I should be making phone calls or texting or being in contact with people.
Yeah.
There's like a week that this is going to be tough. Be in contact with people, because I think it's that contact piece that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that Bill really nailed, is that constant contact with another alcoholic.
Yeah, there's some things that you can quibble about, and there's some things that you can say you don't like about this program. And I would wholeheartedly, I feel the same way about some things of my own. But you're absolutely right. The contact with another alcoholic on a regular basis, right? The way that's said other places is, regular meetings at regular places. So you go to a meeting where everybody knows you, everybody knows how you act typically, so that people get to know you, so that when you're off, that these people can identify. It's really easy for me, my two main meetings, and then with the Joe and Charlie, there's a small group of people, and I'm just telling you, they could tell you, they could tell me, when I'm not right. Like, they could really identify that. And they'll look at me like, hey, you okay? What's going on? Right? They'll pick up on that because they see me all the time. And I'm the same way. Like, I could tell they're grouchy or this. And I could say, hey, what's going on? Why are you so grouchy today? So, yeah, going to those regular meetings for me is really important. And that's why, like I said, I find the meetings I like. I've encouraged guys that I've worked with to do the same thing. Find whatever meetings you like and stick to those meetings. It doesn't mean you can't change that up once in a while either, but stick to those meetings so that people get to know you, so you can have that contact with other alcoholics.
Or you could take the other approach that you just keep switching meetings so you don't meet those people.
Yeah, right.
People do that.
Yeah, people do that. You see that all the time. People pop in this meeting, that meeting. But listen, it's all about quality of sobriety. For me, it's not about quantity. I mean this honestly. I don't pay a lot of attention to how many years I have. I do, because I really think it's important. Like, how am I doing today? How am I acting today? One of the big questions is, how am I acting at home today? One of the things, little stories, we took in a cat over the weekend, and there's a long story behind it. I won't, but it was my mother-in-law's old cat, and we had given it to a friend of ours who's one of us and has slipped, and she's been taking care of this cat for the last 8 years, but she's not doing well right now. And my wife said to me last week, I think I need to go get the cat from this person. And we have a dog. I didn't want a cat. I didn't want to introduce this whole thing, but I get it. It's like, I get the fact that my wife felt like this. And we need it. And the truth is, like, I told my wife, like, this is not going to be fun. Like, it's right. We're going to introduce this. This is not I know this cat because it was my mother-in-law's. It's not a sociable cat. It doesn't like a lot of attention. It's not my meetings help me deal with that situation. Like, I immediately understood that I was going to be under a lot of pressure to do a lot of work with this cat, because I demand a lot out of the animals that live in my house, and I've embraced it. And the reason why I'm able to do that is because I go to meetings and I talk to people. And our buddy Edson, right? And this is, I told him Friday. I'm like, hey, guess what? I'm picking up a cat tomorrow. I'm like, I don't want a cat. And he looked at me and he goes, you didn't want your freaking dog before, did you? And I said,
that's right.
Right. So, and I laughed at him. That's what I mean. So Edson knows me, so he can call me on that. Because if you haven't heard, I love my dog, which I did not want at the time we got it. But he immediately said that to me. You didn't want the freaking dog, did you? I'm like, you're absolutely right, And so anyway, so that's off the topic a little bit, but that is why I go to meetings. I go to meetings because it helps me deal with that situation. Stress will be higher with me and my wife, which is fine. We may not be getting along as well, but it doesn't have to blow out of proportion. That's the key, right? It's like, okay, I sort of get it. But the other thing we were talking about, Matt, is like when we went, we've talked about this before. Our meetings are getting smaller.
Yes.
Right? And we've talked about, like, why do we go to a meeting when there maybe will only be 3 or 4 people, right? And we just had this, last week on the meeting where people had shared, like, they would go to a meeting, there would only be 2 people. And the question was brought up, do you still have a meeting if there's only 2 of you? Right? And that was part of that discussion is why do we, and then the answer is, well, why do you have that meeting if there's only 2 of you? And it's the same reason why we do this podcast, right? We do this podcast because we don't know who's going to be out there listening to it. And we don't know if somebody's going to come up across this podcast who may need to hear something that we're talking about that night. Maybe it's this one, maybe it's another one. But that's why we do it. And that's why you have a meeting, even if it's just 2 of you. And for far as I'm concerned, if I'm opening up a place for a meeting, and I'm the only person who shows, I probably sit there for most of that meeting time and read in case somebody shows up, So those are the type of things that we talk about. People wonder, and like your wife wondered, how long are you going to have to do this? And again, when you start looking at it, it's like, do I have to stay sober my whole life? Do I have to not drink for the rest of my life? And the answer is no. You just have to not drink for today.
That's a tough thing to think about the rest of your life.
I agree, and that's why you don't think about, I have to do these meetings for the rest of my life. No, I just have to do these meetings for now, for today, for this week, and then it all sort of works its way out. There's a fellowship. We talk about it. There's a fellowship that goes on. I go to these meetings. Usually there's lots of laughing, lots of joking before and afterwards. Sometimes the meeting is fun. Sometimes the meeting is dead serious, depending on the meeting, depending on the topic. But there is a social aspect to it, too.
Yeah, I like going to Monday because Mike is there, and Mike will say the same thing over and over again in the first 15 minutes, and I get a kick out of that.
Oh, I love Mike. Mike has added a lot to my life, and I have a good relationship with him. I tease him all the time. I try to help him as much as I can, not just with he's pretty good with his alcoholism, but he's got a lot of isms, and we have a relationship that I could talk to him about his isms and give him some advice. And Mike's not a young guy. I don't expect to be able to change him at this point in his life, but he realizes some of those things, and he's a good guy. Mike's a really good guy. He's fun to have around.
Mike is one of these guys that if you go to meetings, you might know him. He is the type of guy who, because of his presence, that meeting exists or does a lot of little things that make the meeting happen. Mm-hmm. And if you were to ask somebody like Mike, do you think you're important to this meeting? No, I don't do enough. I don't do very much here. I just show up. But this is the type of guy who's always ready to give out chips or always ready to do the preamble, is the first one to move the chairs. Yeah. These are little things. But having somebody at a meeting who's willing to do the little things is so important.
Absolutely. Not only that, but he'll step up all the time. It's like, especially that Monday night meeting or even the Friday night meeting. Like that Monday night meeting, if something happens and whoever's supposed to chair doesn't show up, Mike's a go-to guy. Hey, Mike, can you chair tonight? Sure, I'll chair tonight. Like never says no. Never, ever says no. Always says, sure, I can chair tonight. And a lot of people don't like to do that. A lot of people try to beg off on that stuff. He doesn't. And you're right. He does a lot of little things. And they're not big things. Mike will probably never be a treasurer of a group or a secretary of a group, but he's going to do a lot of little things to help keep that meeting going for sure. And we need those people, and I appreciate those people.
I would make the case that the person who is willing to come early and set up the chairs every week is more important than the treasurer.
Yeah.
The treasurer is just collecting the money and paying the bills, and it's sort of, there's a flurry of activity that you need to do, and then you're done.
Right.
But if I put the cash in my drawer and I don't run the books this week or next week, that's fine. If you don't have somebody who's going to move the chairs, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If nobody wants to read the preamble, that's a problem. It doesn't make for a lively meeting. Yeah. And I know the thing that's been frustrating you, and it can frustrate me too, because it feels like failing, is this Monday night meeting had started from 40 people.
Yeah.
And there were like 8 people this week.
Right.
It is really, it's not as many people. It's not, I was going to say it's filled out, but it hasn't filled out. It's on the opposite of the filling out.
Yeah, and that can be frustrating. And you and I talked about this when we were talking about topics for this podcast and all. And again, it was a newer guy at that meeting who shared something that I needed to hear that night. I have a friend, Jim, and Jim used to always share. I haven't seen Jim. He lives down on the coast of Connecticut, and our meetings are a solid hour away from him now. Connecticut's not a big state, but where we are from where he lives is about an hour. And he used to work up this way, so he used to come to meetings, and I haven't seen him in a while, and I'm expecting that as time goes on, I'll see him less and less. But Jim used to say, I go to 3 or 4 meetings a week because I never know which one I'm going to hear what I need to hear for that week. And I always took that took that to heart. Like, I don't know, what meetings or what person is going to say something that I need to hear. And this newcomer, for us, not newcomer to the program, but new to our Monday night meeting, has been sharing stuff that's been hitting right where I need to have it hit. And I was feeling down, looking around at the meeting, thinking, look at this, man. There's 10 of us here or 12 of us here. I mean, remember when this meeting was 40, like solid 40 people. And then he told that story about him and the other guy just showing up, and just the two of them, and the other guy, another Mike, said, "Hey, do we still have a meeting?" And he said, yeah, we have a meeting. And they had a meeting, and they both said they liked it. But we have to have those meetings, even when they're small. And part of that is service, right? I look back at it. When I came into this program, people were there to help me out. And I feel like I have to give back to that. And I need to make sure that I'm available to give back. And if that means I need to show up, listen, I do 2 regular meetings. I go to more than 2 typically. Depends. Now I'm doing a Joe and Charlie, and I'm doing this. And I count both of those as program stuff. So that's 4 times a week. But I go to 2 solid meetings that I'm really involved in. And I add some other meetings as I go along. But I go to those meetings because I need to be able to hear some of these things from some of these other people. And I need to be there to hear a message, because if I'm not there, then I can't hear that message. And plain and simple.
Right.
Right.
So the other thing that it's important to go to meetings when you have sobriety, if 12 steps are the things you do, who's going to guide the newcomer if they don't run into people with good sobriety? And good sobriety does not equal number of years. I know some people who have many decades who I would not want to live in their footsteps. And I know people with 6 months that I'm astounded. Like, this person has got it better than me, and I need to learn from that person with 6 months.
Yep.
You need to have meetings where people really walk the walk, so that when that new person comes in, they have somebody to role model after. The newcomer helps us, we help the newcomer.
Right.
And that's why, because if we stop going to meetings, who's going to teach that person?
100%. And we could all say, oh, let somebody else teach that person. Or you get to somebody like me who's a little bit older, and you go, well, guys don't want older, sponsors. They want younger guys to sponsor them. And some of that is true. But it's not completely true, because I've had people in the last 3 or 4 years ask me to sponsor them. Some have been my age, and some have been much younger than me. So, we need to be available to that. And it's not only about sponsoring. It's, because, last night we did working with others, and I said when I shared that a lot of people take this as sponsorship. But working with others is so much more than that. It's one of the things that attracted me to my Friday night meeting, that I fell in love with the guys who were there, was I saw guys who had decades of sobriety, 15 years or maybe 20 years or whatever it might be. And I saw that they struggled with some of the same things I struggled with. And it gave me hope that things may not be perfect, but I could still struggle with stuff, because early on I was like, I just thought my life would be perfect. I really did. I thought I would cut out.
Me too.
I thought I would cut out drinking, and that everything else would take care of itself, and I would have this really, really good life. And I have a good life, but it's a human life, so it has its ups and downs, and I have to deal with people and work and all those other things. So by going to meetings, I was able to see that other people would be able to go through those things, same things, struggle with those things, but not have to drink over them.
Right.
And I was able to identify with that and go, okay, so I can do this too. If they can put together 15 or 20 years and still struggle with certain aspects of life, I can do that too. It gave me hope that I can keep my sobriety even in tough times.
I know of a guy who's probably got 40 years now, and he talks all the time, first 5 years of sobriety, my mother died, my father died, I lost my job, I lost my house. Last 5 years of sobriety, my son killed himself, my daughter killed herself, I had a motorcycle accident, and I didn't have to drink over it.
Right.
And it's important to hear something like that over and over again, that look at what this guy has gone through. Mm-hmm. This is hell. He didn't drink over it and kept going to meetings. because that's the key is you're not going to have perfection. You're going to have bad times. Last week or so, I've been exhausted because of stuff at home, stuff at work. And when I'm exhausted, I am emotionally a mess. But I'm aware that now it's okay. Okay, I'm tired. I'm going to be a little emotionally messy. I'm not going to be perfect. That's okay. What do I need? I need to get some rest. And I have a place to go. And I have tools. That's the key. You keep going to meetings because you need to sharpen the saw so that it is easy, so that it is a case of I go to meetings just because it's something fun to do. That's a real misconception for new people. I had it. It's homeless men with trench coats in a cement-floored basement, one incandescent light bulb. And the good meetings are a lot of fun, especially before and after. There are great characters. And the age thing, I don't think is a big deal because the age thing cuts through. Because you have a problem and this other person had a problem, it's easy to relate a 23-year-old with a 73-year-old.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the few places that's really, really true. That I do think that age melts away in good meetings, and that because we all have this common bond, which is the problem with alcohol or drugs for some of us, but because we have this common bond, that the age stuff does melt away, and we can really, really relate to everybody in those rooms. And it is fun. One of the Friday night guys, there's a bunch of them. There's probably like a half a dozen of them or so. They go out to dinner almost every Friday night, right? They go out to dinner, and it's just a way to do it. So you go out to dinner, not everybody shows up every week, but 3 or 4 or 5 of you go out for dinner. You spend an hour having dinner. You spend an hour and a half, some of the guys go out for ice cream afterwards. It's a whole social thing. And on top of it, you're getting, like you said, you're getting your tools sharpened so that you can use them, you can use them when you need them.
And you're building connections with people so that if something goes wrong, you have somebody very comfortable, multiple people you can talk to very comfortably about your problem so you don't have to drink. And the more you build those relationships and those emotional deposits over time, the better off you're going to be You're not going to be in an awkward situation.
Yeah, it becomes so much easier to talk to somebody. Somebody shared about it on one of the meetings that it's so much easier to talk to somebody who sort of is already in the loop. If you talk to people regularly, they sort of know what's going on, so you don't have to fill in the whole backstory is the way they said it, right? So if you have these relationships with people and they know, like you have shared, like your wife is traveling more, so there's going to be times, right? So, if you call up me or John or some of the other guys who know the story, like we'll know that that's going on. We'll know that you're stressed out. We can have that conversation with you. Those are the type of things that we find out with other alcoholics, and that we're able to help a little bit easier than you typically would.
Yeah. I think Instagram is helpful for that too. That's contact with another alcoholic, even if it's virtual.
Yeah.
And if I see something I like, I try and leave a comment that is encouraging because, again, I'm encouraging somebody else. Mm-hmm. I'm making contact. It's a little thing that I can do. It's with a stranger, but it's a little thing. It's another tool that's out there. A podcast. I can sit there and listen to other people talk about their issue or their topic. And if it's really good, I feel like I'm involved. Yeah. These are all great things. And this is why you keep doing it. I saw a clip from, I don't remember the name of the show. It was Alice and Janney was on it where they were alcoholics. And it was a clip where she gets up from the couch. And I guess the boyfriend said, "Where are you going?" She goes, "I'm going to a meeting." "You went last night. You're going again?" She goes, "Yes, I woke up an alcoholic."
Yeah, right. That's it. I woke up an alcoholic. I wake up every day an alcoholic. Yeah, I've heard people say that too. Every day I wake up, I'm an alcoholic, and I need to do something for my alcoholism.
Now, I felt bad hearing that because I'm like, I'm not going every day like her.
Right.
But then again, that's a TV show.
Right.
It's not real.
Right. But there are people who go every day, and if you can, and there was a time, when I first came back to this after I relapsed, I went to meetings a lot. I went to 5 meetings a week easily. Sometimes some weeks I went to a meeting every night because I just needed to. My life was in shambles, and I was trying to hold everything together. And what I found was that I needed to spend time in meetings. So I understand that every day I needed to go out to a meeting. I don't need that today. But I do know that, when I get stressed out, that the best place for me to be is meetings. So, that's something I can always do is when I want to feel better is go to a meeting, because no matter what it is, I always feel better after a meeting.
If you're not a meeting person, that's okay too.
I agree.
There are plenty of ways where you can be in contact. I know Jill Teets has a Patreon program where she basically has meetings every week. Recovery Elevator has basically meetings for a fee. There are ways that you can be in contact with other alcoholics or people with alcohol use disorder where you can get that 12-step work without getting that 12-step work. I'd love to know what your process of spreading the message is, or meeting with somebody else so that you stay free of alcohol. You can reach us at Instagram at SoberFriendsPod, or email Matt@SoberFriendsPod.com, or the website SoberFriendsPod.com. Steve, thanks for making it a great show tonight.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me, and we'll catch you. We'll do it again next week.
We will do it again next week, and that's when we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/SoberFriendsPod.